Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we take a whole stack of sources, research, articles, all our notes, and we really dig in to find the most fascinating insights for you.
And today, we're looking at a question it sounds simple, but really isn't. Just how vast was the Roman Empire, really? Specifically, how far did their military reach extend?
Right. We're trying to get past those standard maps we all see.
Exactly. We want to pinpoint the actual documented edge, the furthest point.
Because, yeah, you picture Rome, you think Britain, North Africa, maybe over towards Mesopotamia, that huge sweep.
But what did that actually mean on the ground logistically all those centuries ago?
And the sources even mention these old Roman legends, right?
Yeah.
About places so far away they sounded, well, almost mythical, strange people, impossible journeys.
It shows that even for the Romans, the edges of their known world felt incredibly distant, almost alien.
Yeah.
And that's really the challenge our sources tackle. They want to move beyond those legends and find the single most remote, permanently established military outpost.
Okay, permanently established, so not just a temporary camp.
No, exactly. Confirmed, enduring Roman military presence based on solid evidence. Archaeology, inscriptions, that kind of thing.
Okay, so let's unpack that. How do you even measure remoteness back then? It can't just be like drawing a straight line on Google Maps, right?
Absolutely not. I mean, linear distance gives you a number, sure.
Mm-hmm.
The Mesopotamia, okay, it's about 3,400 kilometers from Rome.
That sounds very far.
It is. But that number is almost, well, meaningless without knowing how long it actually took to get there.
Ah, right. Because ancient travel wasn't straightforward. You had mountains, rivers, the sea, weather, all of it.
Exactly. A short distance on the map over tough terrain could take way longer than a much further distance along a good road or a clear sea lane.
So how do the sources figure that out?
This is where they bring in a really fascinating modern tool called ORBIS.
ORBIS, what's that?
It's basically a Roman travel simulator. It uses historical data routes, transport methods, even things like seasonal conditions to estimate journey times across the Roman world. So it measures distance not just in kilometers, but in days of travel, which is how the Romans would have thought about it.
That completely changes the perspective, doesn't it? So places that look close on a map might actually be logistically way further out?
It totally reframes the geography. So the sources first look at the usual suspects, the frontiers at the empire's peak, around 117 AD under Trajan.
Germania, Britannia, Egypt.
Right. Armenia, Mesopotamia. Mesopotamia, as we said, 300 to 400 kilometers linearly.
Okay, but what does ORBI say about the time?
Well, when you run those journeys through the simulator, Armenia, which is actually a bit closer linearly, about 3,000 kilometers, often comes out as taking longer.
Really?
Yeah, potentially a 46-day journey from Rome, depending on the route and the time of year. It's still very far, of course, but maybe not the absolute edge in time terms.
Okay, so the traditional big frontiers might not be the answer time-wise. What about those really deep expeditions? Didn't the Romans try to find the source of the Nile or push into Arabia or Nubia?
They certainly did. There were definitely probes and military movements far beyond the established borders, into sub-Saharan Africa, across deserts. Absolutely.
So those must have gone incredibly far.
They did, geographically. But the sources are really careful here. These were mostly temporary things, campaigns, reconnaissance missions, maybe short-lived occupations.
Ah, okay. So they didn't leave behind evidence of a permanent, continuously occupied military base.
Exactly. Not that kind of lasting archaeological signature we need for this specific question. The most remote permanent outpost.
Got it. So if it's not the usual frontiers and it's not those temporary expeditions, where does this deep dive actually lead us? Where do the sources point?
This is where it gets really surprising. It basically redraws that mental map most of us have of the Roman Empire's reach.
Okay.
The most compelling evidence we have, based on a major archaeological find, points to a place thousands of kilometers beyond those expected frontiers.
All right, I'm braced. Where?
The Farasan Islands.
The Farasan Islands? Okay, gotta admit, that doesn't immediately ring a Roman military outpost bell for me. Where are they?
They're a group of islands off the southwestern coast of modern-day Saudi Arabia.
Wait, sorry, Saudi Arabia.
Deep in the Red Sea.
Hold on. Romans.
Right.
Military presence off the coast of Saudi Arabia. That seems, well, it seems completely off the standard map.
It absolutely is. We're talking about islands way, way down the Red Sea. The straight line distance from Rome is already huge, maybe 4,000 kilometers.
Okay, that's further than Mesopotamia.
Yeah, but the actual travel distance, using likely routes by land and sea, is estimated even further, around 4,640 kilometers.
Wow. And what does ORBIS, the travel simulator, say about the time? How long to get troops from Rome to the Farasan Islands?
The estimates suggest a minimum journey time of around 46 days.
Same as Armenia, potentially.
Potentially, similar in minimum time, yes, but likely stretching much longer, maybe over 2 months, depending heavily on sea conditions, ship availability, the specific land routes taken.
Yeah.
It's right at the edge of ancient logistical capability.
That's genuinely staggering to think about. Okay, so what's the proof? How are we sure this wasn't just, a shipwreck or a quick visit?
This is where the evidence is really solid. The sources zero in on a discovery made back in 2004. It's the gold standard, a detailed Latin inscription
An inscription?
carved right into the rock on one of the
A
islands.
Roman military inscription on an island in Saudi Arabia.
Exactly. And it's incredibly specific. It clearly states it was put up by a vexillation that's a detachment from the 2nd Legion Triana Fortis,
Okay, a known legion.
a very well-known legion, primarily based in Egypt. And it gives a date, 144 AD, during the reign of Antoninus Pius.
Wow.
And crucially, it says it was dedicated by the commander, Prefect Publius, who was in charge of the port of Farasan, which is clearly Farasan, and the Sea of Hercules, which seems to be their name for that part of the Red Sea.
That is remarkably unambiguous. It's like a sign saying, Roman army was here, Unit X, Commander Y, Year Z, we run this port.
Pretty much. It's undeniable proof of a Roman military unit stationed there, overseeing a port and the surrounding sea. And there's even a second, though damaged, inscription found later that mentions Legio VI Ferrata, another legion active in the east.
Suggesting it wasn't just a one-off posting?
Exactly. It points towards a planned, maybe evolving, but definitely established military presence.
Okay, so the evidence is solid. They were there. But the why? That's the huge question. What possible strategic reason could Rome have for putting troops on remote islands thousands of kilometers away, deep in the Red Sea?
Right, and this is where the context is everything. Look at where the Farasan Islands are located. They sit smack in the middle of major sea trade routes coming up the Red Sea.
Oh, trade routes.
These sea lanes were absolutely vital for Rome. Why? Because they offered a way to get goods from India, Arabia, maybe even further east.
Without going through the traditional overland routes.
Exactly, without having to deal with the powerful Parthian Empire and later the Sassanids, who controlled those land routes through Persia and Mesopotamia.
So this wasn't about conquering the islands themselves or fighting a local enemy. It was about controlling the sea lanes, protecting trade.
That's what the sources strongly argue. The outpost's main job was almost certainly maritime logistics, surveillance, maybe anti-piracy, and generally controlling those vital trade routes.
Ensuring the safe passage of ships carrying spices, silks, luxury goods.
Precisely. Bypassing their main geopolitical rivals in Persia. It might have also involved customs collection or managing diplomatic contacts related to that trade.
This really makes you rethink Roman strategy, doesn't it? We usually picture legions on the Rhine or the Euphrates pushing land borders.
Right.
But this shows them projecting military power thousands of kilometers away purely for economic security, to protect trade flows that deliberately bypass their conventional enemies.
And it underlines just how interconnected the ancient world really was. Rome's strategic thinking, their power projection, it wasn't just about territory or defense against neighbors. It was deeply driven by economics, by safeguarding those incredibly valuable trade routes.
So an outpost on some isolated Red Sea islands suddenly makes perfect strategic sense when you factor in the value of that maritime trade from the east and the desire to cut out the middlemen or rivals on land.
Absolutely. It fits the bigger picture of Roman economic strategy.
So summing this up, what's the big takeaway here? The Farasan Islands discovery isn't just a sort of fun fact. It actually changes how we should think about Roman reach, right?
Definitely. It teaches us, I think, that understanding historical geography isn't just about looking at static lines on old maps.
You need more.
You need a much more dynamic approach. You have to combine everything. The ancient texts, sure, but also military history, the specifics of trade networks, the archaeology.
And crucially, using modern tools like ORBIS to get a real sense of the logistics, the time involved in ancient travel.
Exactly. It's the convergence of all those things that led to this, well, pretty incredible discovery.
And there you have it, a deep dive showing how historical geography really comes alive when you combine ancient sources, modern simulation tools like ORBIS, and amazing archaeological finds like those inscriptions on the Farasan Islands.
Yeah, who would have guessed? The documented farthest permanent Roman military base wasn't somewhere famous like Britannia or Mesopotamia,
Right.
but thousands of kilometers further away on these islands in the Red Sea, off the coast of what's now Saudi Arabia.
It's just a powerful reminder, isn't it? Understanding the past means getting beyond the neat map lines and really grappling with the messy realities. Travel, trade, logistics, human effort across these huge distances.
And the Farasan Outpost discovery genuinely reshapes how we see Rome's priorities. Protecting those sea trade routes, bypassing the Parthians and Sassanids, was clearly vital enough to justify this incredible logistical reach. It shows a naval capability and strategic focus way beyond what many people assume.
So for you, our listener, maybe something to chew on as we finish up. What other assumptions do we maybe hold about ancient civilizations? Or historical limits in general? Assumptions that could be completely overturned if we started combining different kinds of evidence, maybe from unexpected places, or use new methods to look at old problems.
Yeah, what other edges of empires or influence, maybe driven by economics or forces we tend to overlook, are still out there, waiting to be uncovered just beneath the surface of our standard historical narratives?